Hi, everyone. I'm Ramey Perry, a senior partner account manager here at WP Engine, and I'm thrilled to be here and spend this time with you today. Our topic today, money marketing pits, where brands tend to waste time and budget, which is really relevant right now. I think we're all seeing that in 2025, budgets are tight. And so what we want to talk about today is actually how we do that smarter and how brands work smarter with agencies and how agencies work better with their brand clients. So I'm excited today to be joined by four of our WP Engine agency partners that will speak to us today and share their insights and views on this. James Bavington, with the CTO at Strategic, Phil Crum, the SVP of Technology at 10up, Chuck Pearson, who is the CEO at Rareview, and Sylvan Reinhold, who's the head of technology at Rhythm. So before we jump in, James, let's start with you. You want to provide us a little bit of more information about you and your team?
Of course. Yeah, thank you for having me. So I'm James from Strategic. We're based in London and we're an integrated agency covering a whole variety of things from WordPress development through to digital marketing services. And whilst my background is in front-end development, I work with clients now on technical and digital strategy.
Thank you for joining us. Phil?
Hello, everybody. So excited to be here, back for another edition of Decode. My name's Phil. I'm Senior Vice President of Technology at 10up. We're a full service, totally remote digital agency. We build websites, apps, any kind of digital experience, and really focus on trying to build those highly engaging, high quality experiences that set you apart, help your customers understand you, what you do, and ultimately help you build your business.
Thank you for joining us, Phil, for another year. Chuck, what about you? Tell us a little about you and Rareview.
Yeah, hey guys, happy to be here. I'm Chuck from Rareview. We're a creative agency. We're headquartered in Southern California, Orange County, actually. And we started in 2002, so we've been doing this for quite some time.
All right, you want to finish us off there, Sylvan?
Of course, and thanks for having me. Excited to be here today. Sylvan here, Head of Technology at Rhythm Interactive. I oversee our agency's engineering and quality assurance teams and coordinate our technology strategy and processes. And our agency really covers a broad range of services like strategic consulting, CRM, media, SEO, product, brand, content, data, and insights. And I think the topic today is especially interesting to me because I engage a lot between the disciplines and both with our internal teams and our clients' counterparts. So this will be very interesting for me.
Let's just jump right in then. Again, appreciate y'all participating today and being so generous with your knowledge. So first, I think let's just kind of get into a little bit of State of the Union, right? I think we're all hearing these conversations from our brand partners and internally around budget and direction and looking for guidance. Phil, from the 10up side, what are y'all hearing from your clients as we, are going into Q2 right now?
As we've headed into 2025, and especially as we're starting to get into the year, it seems like we're landing in kind of a balance between the two. Many of the customers that we're talking to, both new prospects and folks that we've been working with for, in some cases, a decade or more, are in a position now where they're a little bit more comfortable spending on digital experiences, but they're very, very mindful of what kind of value they're going to get out of those experiences. That doesn't necessarily mean they're trying to optimize for cheapness, they're trying to optimize for getting it done as quickly as possible, but they need to build a business case. They need to be able to go to their team, they need to be able to go to their boss, they need to be confident that whatever they're building is going to set them up to be able to grow their business, hit the goals that they're trying to reach, and ultimately deliver successfully. So a lot of the folks that we've been chatting with have been trying to figure out how to manage that balancing act, how to be good stewards of their budget, how to invest in the places where it makes sense to invest, especially now that we have a bunch of fun speculative technologies and new things like AI that we're trying to figure out how they fit into the picture and where they can deliver value. And they're willing to make those investments, but they look to partners like us to understand, is this going to work? How do we measure its success? How do we know if it's working? How do we pivot? How do we iterate? And how do we ultimately get the most bang for our buck?
So it's that kind of era of cautious innovation, right?
Exactly.
James, do you have something to add to that?
The conversations for us typically are starting around return on investment. I'm seeing weighting in RFPs heavily reliant on value for money. Which is quite unusual. So the actual strategy implementation, is being downweighted. That's been on 2 or 3 RFPs I've been working on over the last couple of months. But also, marketing directors, teams that we're engaging with, they're looking for an agency that can bring something to the table rather than just sort of being briefed and being told what to do. So heavy focus on investment, heavy focus on value, projected impact of the work that we're doing, so that they can take the business case, the rationale forward and feel confident themselves that the risk has been mitigated. But they really are looking for insights, innovation, someone to guide them through the world of AI. They want that from agency partners, moreover. So, a lot of parallels to what Phil's saying that we're seeing as strategic.
I think I would kind of back up what Phil and James were saying there. I think in some ways their budgets seem to be tightening a little bit. At least what we're kind of seeing is there's some holding pattern sometimes. And what's kind of interesting is some of our clients are kind of looking forward to what does 2026 look like? What does 2027 look like? They're almost looking further down the line. Right. We're kind of having some of those conversations now. I think as Phil mentioned, they're some of our clients want to get into AI and look at what personalization means and some of these other hotbed items. It does seem like some of the budgets are sort of holding a little bit right now. Some of our clients have fiscal years that are going to end in the middle of the summer, start up in July. And so, I think towards the end of this year right now, we are in a little bit of a holding pattern. Some of those budgets will release next year. But I would say that in terms of new stuff, on the marketing front in particular, it seems like clients want to kind of move more to like an omni-channel approach where you're really thinking about, every touch point that you have from your website to your email marketing to social media and trying to create a unified experience and not just, hey, you have the website that's been up for 10 years and it does okay. And you have, slow loading times and whatnot, but you're doing really well on email marketing, whatever that might be. I think there's more of, clients wanting to kind of figure out a way to make sure that experience that the customer has from the top to the bottom, every touch point is really seamless.
Very insightful. Thank you. So then are y'all seeing any change in how clients want to structure your partnership, whether it's, okay, normally we've kind of really owned these projects and worked in tandem with the in-house team, but rhythm has been really the driver. Are you seeing how your brand clients are looking to engage with you differently, whether that's, hey, we want to look at more of a short-term plan versus a long-term plan, or we're actually going to own more of the development and you own more of the design? Are y'all seeing a little bit of change that's signifying any kind of trends of how your brands are approaching these partnerships?
Well, I would say I agree with all of the above. I think it's very much a multi-channel approach that clients are looking at right now. In particular, I think you have to, as an agency, really prove your value compared to the next agency that might fill your role otherwise, right? And I think there is a lot more that clients are looking for agencies to be a strategic partner, a strategic consultant to them, looking at the entire ecosystem and really providing a strategy and roadmap together with them in collaboration, right? So you're not looking anymore at just a single subsystem in the ecosystem that you may be able to just replace, right? You're looking much more at what does the overall ecosystem look like? How do you integrate with potentially other systems that will still remain in there, so that you don't look at something like scrapping everything from the ground up, but really looking at what is repurposable, right? In that sense, I think from the perspective of development, I think there is a bit of a differentiation between the types of engagements, right? So a lot of times when we look at the strategic engagement, the upfront engagement, discovery, definition of a project or of an engagement, right? That is typically a very collaborative approach, right? So when we look at what is the overall strategy, roadmap, what is the approach, that's when we really look at collaborating very closely with the in-house teams on all disciplines, right? Whether that is the marketing team, whether that's the product team, the technology IT team, that sort of thing, right? When you're looking at the development part of it, there is typically more of a compartmentalization, I would say, right? So you'll have certain aspects where the client team might have an in-house IT team that manages certain parts of the infrastructure, certain subsystems that you need to integrate with, right? In those cases, you very closely collaborate with them on integrations, endpoints, that sort of thing. But other aspects, for example, you want to be a bit more careful unless you have a very structured process in place, right? So I think it's more of a case by case situation where you really have to think about in which cases is what type of collaboration, the most efficient and effective. But I think overall, clients are looking very much more for strategic exercise to go through with the agencies at this point, really being a long-term partner also. Maybe also speaking to whether it's an one-off engagement versus an ongoing engagement, right? And then beyond the launch of the product, also thinking about something like an evolving maintenance aspect of the product, right? So that you don't just maintain the product at the base level, fixing bugs, but really also thinking strategically about how you evolve the product functionally and from a product perspective.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have any other thoughts before we kind of move on around how maybe brands are approaching you in a different way, or you're approaching your collaboration and your partnership with brands before we kind of move on to a different topic? Anyone else have anything to pepper in here?
I can probably just build on that slightly because we're seeing something very similar where discovery phases of our projects are always incredibly important. But I'd certainly say over the last 12 months, they're more in-depth, they're more collaborative. The aspiration to get the project right first time has never been more obvious to the ones that I've been certainly close to myself. And we're even seeing projects coming in that are almost separated out in phases. So the projects might be paused after the discovery phase, rescoping and addressing the outcomes without just rolling straight into UI design, for example, is something that I'm seeing on a few different projects. So there's certainly the willingness to progress and evolve and invest, but it's very tentative. The steps and what we're being asked to do is really kick over and look under rocks that perhaps the client hasn't thought of to ensure that the due diligence is there right from the outset of the project. So, certainly a key part of projects that have a lot of focus for us at the moment.
That's interesting. And you bring up the word that we all are constantly discussing with, right? Which is ROI. So that kind of transitions us into a good next topic as far as, brands, when you're working with your brands and they do have in-house teams and you're looking to either take things off their plate, fill a skill gap, increase the knowledge and bring extra power to the table. Phil, I'm interested to hear, is the ROI conversation change over the last, 2 years? Do you foresee it changing moving forward? Or is it something that you're like, hey, we know our value, we know the return on investment we drive, and we're going to hold true to that. We're going to anchor to that. So I'm interested how you approach that at 10up.
I think the closer that we can get to having an open dialogue around what is the actual problem each client is trying to solve, the better positioned we are to be a partner in figuring out what the right solution to that problem is. I like to zoom out and remind myself that there are a couple of reasons that folks hire agencies. Number one is just scalability. We want to get this done faster. We need more people to do this. Number two is expertise. And that second angle, that expertise angle, I think can often end up being undervalued or underutilized. 10up is we're a pretty good sized agency. We launch a few hundred websites a year. We've been at it for 15 years at this point. We've worked with clients across every single vertical you can imagine, everything from the Fortune 5 all the way to startups on websites and apps. That's given us a ton of perspective on how to solve different kinds of problems, what works, what doesn't. And it puts us in a position where we can be a partner to draw from that cross-functional knowledge and say, hey, you are having a issue getting folks to convert from their first impression on the website to come back, and maybe it's fill out a form and become a lead. Maybe it's engage with content. Maybe it's become a subscriber, whatever your business is. So we ultimately think that as long as we can build a relationship with each of our clients, as long as we can really develop that understanding of what are the big problems that you're trying to solve here, not just for the platform that we're building, but for the whole business. These websites almost never exist in a vacuum. They're usually there to serve an end. They're not the means to an end in and of itself. Then we can work together with the client to figure out the right way to juggle however many balls we need to manage here, however many platforms, however many existing relationships, however many other departments exist at the client for some really big companies, to get them to an outcome that we feel very good about and that we think will ultimately deliver the success that they need to see to feel like this was a good idea and a good investment.
And Sylvan, what are you seeing from your seat at Rhythm?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it goes back to number one, being a multi-channel specialist that the client can really draw upon whenever their in-house capabilities don't suffice, for example, to cover certain aspects. But also to view the agency really as a strategic consultant, expert, and close collaborator that comes in from an external perspective, right, and can really lend the outside perspective. Also with the benefit of having worked with a multitude of different clients in the same or different verticals, as Phil mentioned, right? So really that enables the agency really to come in as an unbiased expert from the outside, right? And might also be able to help the client to convene certain folks on the inside, right, between different departments or different stakeholders that the client themselves would otherwise not have been able to just bring together in the same fashion, right? And I think the second part to that is, to me, also being able as an agency to come in and also compartmentalize the engagement a lot more, right? You can come in to do only strategy, only UX, or only visual design. You can focus on CRM strategy, marketing aspects, that sort of thing. And that really helps the client also augment where they don't have the necessary resources or skill set, and for the agency to really come in as the expert on certain aspects.
Thank you. So we talk about expertise, right? And we all know that the strategy and the ideation and the creative is the exciting, fun part, right? Where people are excited, they're seeing new things, change is happening fast. Then you get into development where things kind of slow down a little bit. Maybe they're not as, as much of a roller coaster ride. And then you get into a third component, which is what we are talking about: maintenance, cost associated with whether it's hosting or budgets based on marketing tactics, things along those lines. Are you finding that agencies are still, or that brands are still looking to y'all to be the experts there on that, for lack of a better word, less sexy component of the build, and then the ongoing maintenance? Or are you finding that that's where they're having a much stronger point of view internally, whether that's dictated by a particular internal team or just their own set of standards and requirements? So when you look at things like hosting costs, for instance, are you finding that you're still as equally part of that conversation, or is the in-house voices kind of driving that more? Chuck, what are y'all seeing?
Yeah, I would say that our goal always is to be a long-term partner with our clients and to kind of stay on from the very beginning to the very end. And kind of create a long-term relationship where we can kind of help them navigate these different things as they move forward. If we're building a website, for example, and we get to the end, then we want to kind of stay on and maintain that website, make updates to it, help them with their hosting if there's any issues, if it goes down, whatever that might be. So we create these agency partnerships with WP Engine, for example, and it's every client is a little different. So we're trying to find that balance of whether WP Engine should kind of help out a little bit with some of that maintenance stuff, where Rearview can help out. And I think it's just usually like a nice fit there, and we can kind of stay on. Usually early on in this process, we kind of have that discussion before we get started on a project, and we'll kind of talk about what the budget is going forward after the project launches and whatnot, and we'll try to find a nice sweet spot for everybody. We are usually involved in those conversations. And so we can kind of, I guess, guide a little bit, offer some advice and suggestions and whatnot, some expertise. And then sometimes we'll loop in the agency partners. So, but our goal is always to kind of stay on board. And I think most agencies want to kind of create that long-term sort of retainer relationship, if you will.
Yeah. And then to get out in front of those hidden costs that might pop up that they might blame upon you or someone else, and like making sure that there's a clear understanding of what the total cost of ownership is, right? A lot of times I think we hear on our end, what our agency partners so beautifully do with their brands is make them understand that this is a life cycle. It's, it's something that we have to continue to invest in and maintain and iterate upon, and really helping navigate that total cost of ownership conversation. Where here at WP Engine, we're here to support y'all in that conversation, but making sure that, that's such a great trust builder with you and your brand clients. James, you have something to add to that?
Similar to Chuck, really, we plan and talk about the ongoing maintenance and roadmap right from the outset. Often scope creep can build a roadmap in its own right as we go through a project, and establishing that relationship from the outset gives us a good lever to say, well, look, if we want to keep this on budget, on track, let's talk about that as a post-launch phase of work. So for us, similarly, long-term partnerships are great. Often building a project like a website gives us the starting platform to dial into other services like SEO or other website applications. So for us, we like to get that relationship set out from the outset. And the advantage for us of having partnerships and referring our clients, if for example it's WordPress to WP Engine, it's an extension of that service that we can provide. As our whole team is based in the UK, we can't truly offer 24/7 support. So for us, we actively introduce our clients to the WP Engine team so that there's a resource there, for example, if there happens to be an outage or a problem where they need that technical support. So we like to address that and tackle it as a positive right from the outset. And often we find that goes in our favor as having a really comprehensive solution for our clients.
Yeah. And building that strong foundation of a relationship, right? And not seeing as a partner alongside, not just kind of a transactional, none of us want to be vendors, right? That's not why we're sitting here. So interesting. Sylvan, I'd love to hear from your end, like your thoughts on this, and also where you find your clients sometimes maybe burning budget, burning cash, and how you can kind of steward them away, or try to at least, to making sure we're investing our money in the right place at the right time at the right amount, and not trying to either, save money somewhere where we don't need to or overspend where we probably don't need to either. Would love your thoughts on that when it comes to kind of infrastructure and maintenance.
Yeah, I think, and as far as the infrastructure and hosting is concerned, I think the reality is, right, some clients will have such infrastructure in place already, especially when they have a centralized IT department or organization that manages multiple groups across the organization. So the conversation about other platforms, right, is going to be much harder in those cases, or you have to make a much better case, I guess, for coming in with something different, right? And in those cases, the conversation typically revolves around management overhead, security, associated cost, and the consistency or the homogeneity across the ecosystem, right? And making sure that seamless tooling is available, and reducing costs in terms of those aspects. When it comes to the maintenance, I think one interesting aspect to me has been that we always differentiate between kind of the baseline maintenance, where you really just keep the lights on, right? So you make updates, make sure issues are fixed on a monthly basis, that sort of thing. Maybe assist with content entry or whatever the case may be. But the much more interesting aspect to me is more of a long-term, what we call evolutionary maintenance, where you really think strategically as you go after the launch. How do you evolve that platform strategically from a product perspective, from a functional and design perspective? And that then also goes into the aspect of helping the client or enabling the client really to get to a system and to an ecosystem that does not have to be fully replaced after 3 or 4 years, but that really evolves systematically over time, right? So I think that's really a critical aspect, and I think that also makes it a lot more interesting to think about something like maintenance. Rather than looking at it as just, we're maintaining that system and keeping it running, essentially.
You bring up a good point with that, right? Is that so many different types of stakeholders that you as agencies are developing relationships and trust with at every point of the project, right? You've got your marketing team whose priority is going to be different from your development team, who's going to be very different than your finance and operations team. So question around kind of once you've built that trust, you have this partnership, or married, for lack of a better word. Phil, how do you find your approach, for better or for worse, right? How do you find that once you are building those, you're continuing to evolve and build those collaborations and those partnerships, how do you find, where you make sure you're meeting all the different stakeholders where they are and what's important to them? You have total cost of ownership, right? Operations is going to look at that. You look at efficiency and scalability. Developers are looking at that. Marketers are looking at ROI. So how do you make sure that you're continuing those touch points throughout the relationship with your brands to make sure that you still are, building a healthy collaborative relationship with the different stakeholders internally at the brand?
We try to maintain a regular cadence with each of our clients as an opportunity to zoom out, talk about the big picture, talk about what they're thinking about, focusing on, worried about, and talking about how that changes over time, because it always changes. And sometimes folks realize it, sometimes they don't, and sometimes they realize it and they just don't tell us for some reason or another. That can take a couple of different forms depending on the client, depending on the way that their internal teams collaborate. We work with some clients that have very strong internal cultures of collaboration where we can get all of them on a call. They will all make space for each other. They will all happily share a nice, copacetic, aligned roadmap that puts all of the pieces together for us. We also work with some clients that deliberately operate much more departmentally, where legal and finance and procurement will have their own set of priorities. Marketing will have its own set of priorities. Technology will have its own. Product or content will have their own. And part of the value that we can create as a partner is by hearing all of those perspectives and trying to put those together into a singular plan. But it ultimately comes down to trying to gain that understanding of what does success on this platform need to look like for our partner, for their business as a whole, and then within each segment of the business. And then serving as that single unifying point, those folks who can put all of those pieces together, those folks who can pattern match with the experience that they have working with other companies to come back and say, here's a plan, here's what we suggest, here's how we think we can get as much of that done as possible in whatever constraints you've laid out. Sometimes that can be as simple as, here is your sprint backlog for the next 7 or 8 months. Here are all the things that we think you all should be building that you've told us that you want to build, and all the pieces fit together. Sometimes it needs to zoom out to an even higher level, and we need to sit down and even do some workshops sometimes, or guide folks through a process of exploring. Here are a few different pathways we think this could take. Let's talk about what feels good about this. Let's talk about what resonates. Here's a couple of ideas we really don't think you're going to like, but we want to hear that from you. We want to understand why this doesn't resonate for you and how we can all get on the right path and help be stewards with y'all and getting us to where we need to be.
You bring up an interesting point, right? I mean, we're agency folks, product folks, brand folks. We've all got scars from a relationship with an outside partner going off track. Anybody?
Yeah.
It's not. We all have similar scars and bruises here, right? So interesting, James. Where have y'all seen? How did those happen? Like, what are those things that brands and agencies need to keep top of mind of, like, these are some gotchas that might cause unnecessary friction or unnecessary timeline delays or whatever those things that cause the friction. What's a war story, or what have you learned to make sure that you're really top of mind? Because this is an easy way to get off track.
Yeah, it is. And as Phil was going over some client personas, I'm smiling because I can almost picture specific clients that he's describing that I work with that fill that role. One of the challenges I've seen, particularly in my sort of earlier career, is the influence of clients that are a little bit more interdepartmental, hierarchical, people that drop in on a project. Oh, I'll just turn up for the creative phase and share my thoughts. And often their opinion can kind of railroad, stages of discovery and collaboration. One of the things we've been doing more recently very successfully with 2 clients specifically is, particularly for projects that are either in development and we've got access to the existing website, or new websites where user interface design is very key. We're using A/B testing or experimentation a lot more to allow data to drive decisions. So if somebody does drop in and has an idea, or they're trying to include something, we can actually quite efficiently trial and experiment that change. We can sort of use A/B testing platform tools to do that without interfering with the main website, looking at whether it's effective. So it's kind of encompassing and listening to our clients' needs, but working with the kind of client day-to-day contacts to use data to sort of guide those decisions, rather than what I've seen historically is clients take projects completely off piece and then come back and say, oh, I don't like it anymore, or why isn't it working? And it's because people have just been saying yes to everything rather than pushing back with the experts. This is why we're doing things a certain way. So yeah, I think there's so many stories I could recount, but one of the ways we are doing that at the moment is to certainly listen to our clients and not shut them down and be arrogant, but absorb and trial and implement certain things safely, carefully, and allow the data to do the talking.
Yeah. And it's tough too, because they're hiring you for your expertise, which is your point of view and your opinion, right? So it's that balancing it with the overlaying pressure of where's budget, where's timeline, and where's scope, right? And how do we make sure
Exactly.
we're all aligned on that? Chuck, do you have any tricks or tips around, communication hacks or anything that y'all impart at Rareview, whether it's a tool or, regular cadence meetings that y'all are using to make sure everyone is, staying aligned to the best that you can?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? Working at an agency, like every new client we get is completely new, and you're kind of establishing a new relationship, and everybody kind of has their nuances with how they work and the different individuals and communication preferences and all of that. What I have found in the last 20 something years in doing this is that communication for me is paramount to everything else. The more we can communicate, and I would say over communicate versus under, the smoother things go. As James said, we have a lot of projects where new individuals pop in and out at different stages that maybe we weren't expecting. So we get to a design phase and we get a creative person that pops in. Sometimes, actually, in a couple of recent projects we've had, these are outside design consultants kind of popping into the project. So now you have the agency, you have outside resource, and then you have internal resources as well. So it can get a little muddy. For me, the best thing to do is just make sure that we're really communicating what we're doing on a daily basis. I think when we go long periods of time, and I'm going to say like a few days or a week, and there's sort of a gap in communication, maybe we're off focused on doing some design work, for example, and we're not even thinking about, just giving an update to the client. That's when I kind of see things getting a little hairy, or when a client might say, hey, what are you guys doing over there? So for us, I think the biggest hack is just making sure that you have constant communication on a very regular basis, on a daily basis, every 2 days, whatever that might be, making sure that the client at all times kind of knows what we're working on, what the next steps are, the next time we're going to meet, what we're going to review, et cetera. I think in many, many cases, or in most cases, that has sort of allowed the projects to go a little bit smoother, or a lot more smooth than other projects maybe early on where we didn't communicate as much.
Not to sound trite, but it is the common theme here, right? Is manage expectations and make sure everybody is on the same page and understands. And you're right, you can get off real quickly without even knowing. And it's a lot easier to raise your hand in a moment and say, I'm feeling this is a little off, versus, oh, I got to go back and fix and repair something that we should have just jumped right at, 3-4 weeks ago. Sylvan, anything to add to that?
Yes, I think to me, top-down strategy over tactics is a big thing. As Chuck said, communications and relationships, and thirdly, stakeholder alignment. So I think the strategy part is things can typically go sideways fairly quickly if the team focuses too much on the tactics immediately, right? So rather than thinking about what are we trying to solve, the question then starts to be how are we trying to solve it? Like, what is the exact approach that we're taking here without having defined the problem first? So I think that's definitely something to look out for, especially on more strategic and larger engagements. Communications, 100% agree. You want to make sure that you have an upfront alignment between everybody and you set up strong communication channels. And then also set up counterparts between the client and the agency, right? Making sure that you have the right people talking to each other on both sides, between the different departments or groups that really speak the same language, have the same problem background, that sort of thing. And lastly, stakeholder identification, really, and alignment. So typically what you see is if you don't identify stakeholders early enough, you might have a situation where you have stakeholders coming in with strong opinions, folks that haven't been briefed potentially, right, on certain aspects, and then that then come in later. And typically what you then see is the farther downstream you go and the farther downstream you change decisions, the more expensive it gets on a project, right? And I think that's why it's so important to have stakeholder identification and alignment communications upfront and throughout, and really trying to place a premium and focus on that rather than skimping out on that and waiting until later.
So that concludes our time here together. I want to thank these gentlemen for being so generous with their experience and their insights and their opinions. I hope everyone here today can walk away with some learnings and, more importantly, some questions and some ideas that you can bring back, whether you're on the agency side to your team or on the brand side to your team, to continue to grow and look at how you approach your relationship with agency partners and outside third-party collaborators. So thank you so much for joining us for Decode today. We appreciate you spending time, not just with our panelists, but with the WP Engine team in general. If you have any other additional questions or thoughts, or want to learn more about how we partner with agencies and brands, I encourage you to follow us on social media. Feel free to raise your hand. We're all here happy and willing to help out with anything we can. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of Decode. Take care.